All right, let's jump into another deep dive. This time, we're going to explore Thomas Paine.
Thomas Paine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the common sense guy. But we're looking at him through a kind of unique lens, the Enneagram.
Ah, interesting. So not just the revolutionary, but like the personality behind the revolution.
Exactly. Our source material actually argues that Paine was a classic example of self-preservation type 4,
Yeah.
which is, well, super fascinating when you start to see how it plays out in his life.
I can see that. I mean, we often think of these historical figures as almost like mythical beings.
Right. Like statues.
Yeah. But the Enneagram brings them back down to earth, right?
Yeah.
Shows they had fears, desires, just like the rest of us.
Absolutely. For anyone who's not super familiar with the Enneagram, it's basically a system that breaks down personality into 9 interconnected types.
Each with its own kind of core fears and desires, right? And that's what shapes how they approach the world.
Spot on. And in Paine's case, the self-preservation type 4 really shines through. One of the first things the source highlights is his perfectionism and self-demand. Apparently, he was super meticulous with his writing, almost obsessed with making it clear and impactful.
Makes sense for a guy trying to start a revolution.
Right. But it wasn't just about good grammar, was it? The source points out that Paine was really driven by this need to make his ideas accessible to everyone.
So not just for the scholars and the elites.
Nope. Remember, this was a time when literacy was pretty limited. Complex political theory. That was for the fancy folks. Paine wanted to break down those barriers.
So his perfectionism wasn't just about him, it was about the message.
Totally. He spent hours revising, simplifying his arguments. He wanted common sense to connect with everyday people, to spark their passions. And, well, I think we know how that turned out.
Pretty effective, you could say.
Yeah. It's almost like he was crafting the original viral pamphlet, carefully choosing each word to resonate with the widest audience, and that drive to create something meaningful, impactful. That's pretty type 4, right?
Absolutely. That desire to leave a mark on the world, to have their unique perspective heard, and to connect deeply with others, it's all there.
But it wasn't all just intellectual theorizing, right? The source also talks about Paine's sensitivity and empathy for the oppressed. They argue that his passion for justice was super personal, rooted in his own experiences.
That's right. He wasn't just some privileged guy writing about equality from an ivory tower.
Yeah. Paine knew hardship firsthand, poverty, struggle. It wasn't just a theoretical debate for him.
It makes you think about how much more powerful common sense must have been because of that. Like, it was a call to action born from genuine empathy and a shared experience of suffering.
Absolutely. And it's this next part where things get a little more intense, I guess. The source mentions Paine's stoicism and masochistic tendencies.
Masochistic tendencies. Whoa, okay. Hold on. Are we saying Paine was drawn to suffering?
Well, I think it's more nuanced than that.
Right, because that sounds a bit extreme.
It does. What the source seems to be getting at is this idea of being willing to endure pain, hardship, even sacrifice for a greater cause.
Oh, okay, I see. So not enjoying suffering, but seeing it as almost necessary.
Yeah, like a test of his commitment. Think about it. Paine faced imprisonment, poverty, social isolation, and he never wavered in his beliefs.
So it's less about seeking out pain and more about being unbelievably dedicated to his ideals, even if it meant suffering for them.
Precisely. And the source suggests that this kind of unwavering commitment, this willingness to push through adversity, is a hallmark of the self-preservation type 4. Not doing it for personal gain, but for something much bigger. It really makes you think, doesn't it? Like, what are we willing to endure for the things we believe in?
That's a deep question.
It is. But amidst all this talk of suffering and sacrifice, it's easy to forget that the self-preservation type 4 also tends towards creativity and problem solving. And, well, Paine definitely had that in spades.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Just think about how he took these complex political theories and made them into a rallying cry for independence.
Like, he basically wrote the ultimate explainer video for revolution, except with a quill and parchment.
Aha, exactly. And the source points out that this problem solving wasn't limited to his writing. Paine was resourceful in life, constantly adapting to challenges. Remember, this was a time of huge upheaval.
And he was always right in the thick of it.
Yep. Always thinking outside the box, turning limitations into opportunities. It's a pretty key type 4 characteristic.
So it's not just about being creative with words. It's about approaching life with that problem-solving energy.
Absolutely. And for the self-preservation type 4, that creativity often comes from a need to control their environment, to shape their world in a way that feels meaningful and safe.
That makes me think about Paine's relationship with authority, with limits in general. Given his whole revolutionary zeal, was he just a rebel, a troublemaker, or was there something more to it?
That's a great question, and the source digs into this, highlighting Paine's deep-seated refusal to accept limits, especially if they felt like they were stifling progress or individual freedom. Societal norms, institutions, didn't matter to him.
So not just some mindless rebel, more like a
Right.
strategic rebel with a cause.
Exactly. And a prime example of this is his critique of organized religion in The Age of Reason.
Oh, yeah. That was pretty controversial back then.
Hugely. But Paine wasn't afraid to challenge authority, even when it meant facing backlash and criticism. He was willing to push boundaries, to question the status quo, especially if you saw those structures as oppressive or unjust.
Definitely not playing it safe. It takes guts to challenge those deeply entrenched power structures, especially during a time when speaking out could land you in serious trouble.
It does, and that fearlessness, that willingness to speak truth to power, is deeply intertwined with the Type 4's capacity for passionate advocacy.
Which, speaking of, let's talk about Paine's writing style.
Mm.
The man knew how to fire up a crowd. The source calls this out as passionate advocacy, and it's so true. His words just had this incredible power to galvanize people.
They really did. It's like he was throwing rhetorical grenades, just exploding onto the scene and blowing apart old ways of thinking.
Perfect analogy.
Mhm.
His writing wasn't just informative, it was emotionally charged. He took his own feelings about injustice, oppression, hope for a better future, and poured it all onto the page.
And that rawness, that unfiltered passion, it connected with readers. It made them want to act.
It's amazing how much that resonates with modern social movements, don't you think?
Totally.
Think about how activists today use social media to rally support, to give a voice to the marginalized. They're sparking change through powerful storytelling, just like Paine did.
It's a testament to the enduring power of passionate advocacy, whatever the medium. When people speak from the heart, with real conviction, it can have a ripple effect that goes way beyond their immediate circle.
Paine's a perfect example of that.
He is.
It's like he tapped into this universal need for fairness, for justice, and turned it into a force for change. Makes you think about how our own experiences, even the tough ones, can shape what we believe in, the causes we care about.
You're so right.
The source even mentions how Paine's own challenging upbringing, the poverty and hardship, really influenced his views on inequality. They argue that his struggles played a huge role in shaping his intellectual and political development.
It makes sense. Those early experiences become part of us, don't they? They influence how we see the world, the choices we make.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Have you ever noticed that in your own life? Like how certain experiences, even difficult ones, have kind of become part of your DNA,
Yeah.
influencing your values or the things you're passionate about?
All the time.
It's fascinating. But anyway, to bring this back to Paine, the source racks up by highlighting 5 key Type 4 traits that really stand out in his life.
Mm-hmm.
And they offer specific examples for each, which is super helpful in solidifying the connection between the man and the Enneagram.
It's like a cheat sheet for understanding Paine.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So shall we dive into those 5 traits?
let's do it.
Yeah.
All right, so first up, we've got resilience in adversity. And this one, it's not just about bouncing back from tough times. Like, Paine practically thrived on challenges.
Oh, yeah, totally. Look at his career path, journalism,
Wow.
teaching, even corset making.
Right, talk about a mixed bag.
Nothing really stuck until Common Sense. And even then, the guy faced imprisonment, exile, constant political attacks.
But he just kept going, never gave up on those ideals.
Most people would have thrown in the towel way before that.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, right? Like, maybe that Type 4 need for change, that drive to make a real impact, somehow actually drew strength from those obstacles.
That's a fascinating thought. And it actually ties in really well with the next trait, austere lifestyle. Paine wasn't interested in fancy things, wealth, social status. He actively rejected those things.
Yeah, he lived super simply, focused all his energy on his writing, his mission. Even when Common Sense made him famous, he didn't let it go to his head.
Like he was allergic to excess and comfort.
Right, like those things would somehow distract him from his purpose.
Almost like he needed that struggle to stay true to himself.
Exactly. Which brings us to, I think, one of the most powerful traits, passionate advocacy. Paine's writing wasn't just about logic and reason. It was about grabbing the reader, igniting a fire in their belly.
Oh, absolutely. He poured everything onto the page, emotions, convictions, anger at the injustice he saw. And that raw energy, that's what made his work so effective.
You can feel the heat coming off those words, right? Like he's reaching out, shaking you, making you confront reality.
And that takes guts,
Yeah.
especially back then. Challenging the status quo, that was dangerous.
Huge risk. But he did it anyway, which circles back to that resilience we talked about. Criticism, ridicule, threats. He faced it all and never backed down.
He had this unwavering belief in his message, this passion for change that just wouldn't quit.
So powerful. But it wasn't just blind emotion either. The source also mentions intellectual precision, and that's so evident in Paine's work.
Oh, for sure. The guy was meticulous. He did his research, constructed his arguments carefully, made them both persuasive and easy to understand.
He wasn't just playing on people's emotions, he was appealing to their reason as well.
He understood that to create real, lasting change, he needed to win over hearts and minds. And that combination, passion and precision, it's what made him so formidable.
Like a master chess player, anticipating every move, dismantling those old power structures with this incredible precision.
Exactly. And finally, underlying all of this, we have sensitivity to injustice. This was the core of Paine's work, the driving force behind everything he did.
That empathy for the oppressed, his understanding of their struggle, you can feel it radiating from his writing.
It wasn't just some abstract concept for him, it was deeply personal.
And that's what gave his words such weight. He was able to articulate that pain, that longing for something better that so many people felt but couldn't express.
Powerful stuff.
So when we put all these traits together, we get this amazing picture of Thomas Paine. Brilliant, stubborn, passionate, empathetic. It's no wonder he changed the world.
And by seeing those traits through the lens of the Enneagram, we get a much deeper understanding of his legacy. It's like we can see how his personality, his unique way of seeing the world, shaped his actions and helped to spark a revolution.
It makes you think, doesn't it? What if more people had that kind of conviction, that willingness to fight for what they believe in, no matter what?
What a world that would be. And it brings us back to that core question. What can we learn from Thomas Paine? How can his story inspire us to make a difference today? It's a big question, isn't it? I mean, getting inspired is one thing, but actually turning that into, like, real change, that's a whole other challenge.
It is. So where do we even start? What would Paine say?
Well, funny you should mention that. Paine was a huge advocate for self-education.
Makes sense.
He believed knowledge was power and that everyone had the capacity to learn and grow. So I think step one is cultivating that curiosity, that thirst for understanding.
Becoming a student of the world. Like really paying attention, asking questions, searching for new perspectives.
Exactly. And luckily for us, we live in a time where information's everywhere. Books, articles, podcasts, documentaries, it's all out there.
A whole universe of knowledge at our fingertips.
Right. But the key is to not just consume it passively. We have to engage with it, think critically, form our own conclusions.
So less about memorizing facts and more about honing those critical thinking skills.
That's it. Learning to separate truth from, well, whatever's not true.
Yeah, developing our own informed opinions. Which is kind of what Paine was doing with his writing, right? Challenging people to think for themselves, question authority.
Absolutely. He was pushing people to imagine something different, and that skill, that's more important than ever these days.
Oh, totally agree. I mean, with all the information overload, it's so easy to just get swept up in the noise and lose sight of what matters.
It's true. It's like we all need a built-in BS detector.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Something to help us sift through it all, figure out what's real, what's relevant. But even knowing where to start can be overwhelming, right?
It definitely can be. So my advice, start small. Pick one thing you're passionate about, something that really gets you fired up, and dive in. Read, listen, talk to people who are actually working on those issues.
Follow that thread of curiosity wherever it leads.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to get involved. Whatever feels right for you, do it. Volunteer, donate, write to your representatives. Even just having those conversations with friends and family, those can spark change too.
It's about finding your voice, whatever that looks like, and using it to make a difference.
Because that's how change happens. One person, one conversation, one action at a time.
And that's what Paine got, right? He understood that to create a revolution, you had to start by changing hearts and minds.
Right.
Such a powerful idea and so relevant even today.
It really is.
So to all our listeners who are feeling inspired, ready to take action, remember, you don't have to do it alone. There are so many amazing organizations, communities, people out there working towards a better future. Find them, connect with them, learn from them.
And don't be afraid to be bold. Think outside the box, just like Paine did. The world needs your unique perspective, your energy, your commitment.
Great advice. So to wrap up our deep dive into Thomas Paine and the Enneagram, Here's the takeaway. Stay curious, stay engaged, and never, ever underestimate the power of one person to make a difference.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Keep learning, keep exploring, keep fighting for a better world.
And to all our deep divers out there, thanks for joining us on this journey. We'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration.